And welcome into another edition of the Hustle Show podcast for this Hustle Short on Wednesday, October 25th. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by Adam Trigger on this Wednesday as we get you set for the NFL slate. We'll go over some games, take a look at the Survivor schedule as well. And boy, did we escape last week with a couple of Survivor wins there, Trig. But great to be back with you as always here. Kind of a difficult NFL card this week, if you ask me. Not really much jumped off the page at me, but let's get started right here with a couple of different game breakdowns right off the top. And I know you're looking towards Thursday Night Football here between Tampa and Buffalo.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Mark. I haven't bet a single NFL game yet. I'll probably add something today, but that was my sentiment as well. It's just kind of a challenging week. I don't think it's any different than you start to get, to this part of the season. And there's a lot of questions, a lot of injuries, and it gets tougher to lock games in earlier in the week. As far as Thursday Night Football is concerned, Bucks coming up here to Western New York to take on the Buffalo Bills. Man, the Bills, not pretty the last couple weeks, Mark. They should have lost to the Giants, arguably. I mean, if the Giants can punch it in from the 2-yard line or the 1-yard line, they win that game. And then last week, they go lose to the Patriots. I would grade their play as below average to poor the last 2 weeks, which is a stark contrast to what we saw a few weeks ago, right? Like they were blowing out the Dolphins at home, one of the, who's been one of the better teams in the NFL this year, kind of rolling. And the last 2 weeks have not been pretty. But this could be a good chance for them to bounce back. And the Bills, they desperately need a big win. And it feels like the right spot for them to get it. They're at home, Thursday Night Football, primetime game. I feel like they've played well in this spot in the past. So for that reason, I think it sets up nicely for the Bills. But I also think that this is just a good spot to play against the Bucks. And I think you're just getting a Bills team that's far more talented and should be okay on the short week, maybe more so than the Bucks are. So, the Bucks, listen, I don't think Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback. We've talked about it a couple of different times. You go back to, I had a bet on the Bucks week 1. And in that game, I pointed out, listen, I don't really like Baker, but I think he's going to be able to throw into a weak secondary here, and he might be able to keep his team in it as a dog and get them there. The problem here is the Bills pass rush is going to get after him. And, there's a lot of, considering like the Bills, they're banged up defensively, a bunch of starters out. Secondary's kind of, flawed at this point, it looks like, but they're going to get after Mayfield. And really that's going to be the difference here. The Vikings, they weren't blitzing, like Flores hadn't started sending the all out blitz yet. So they were still, not really sending a ton of pressure. And he had one of his really like only really good games of the season in that game. If you look at like sort of what he's done to this point, I think, can we cut? I got to let these, can we just cut this and let me start over from the Bills breakdown, Robert? I have two of the, I got to let my dogs out. Hold on. It's just becoming such an issue here. Let me get these guys out of here. The one just comes in and throws me off. Like we got to do something. Like we got to get them into some sort of like dog daycare. But like my other dog did not do well in dog daycare, which is why. And then we just Mallory's mom just got a new puppy, so she can't really take him right now. Anyway, they're outside. So can you just tell me can you just like go into the Bills game again so I can start this breakdown over?
I'll let you back in.
Okay.
Here we go. Coming down in 3, 2, 1. And I know, Trig, you'll be looking towards Thursday Night Football here between Buffalo and Tampa.
Yeah, I like the Bills in this spot. Both teams coming off tough losses. Of course, the Bucks losing at the last second to the Falcons in a game they had many chances to win. And the Bills losing at the last second to the Patriots in shocking fashion. And that's really back-to-back poor performances for the Bills. The Giants were right on the goal line, could have got them 2 weeks ago. And then the Bills, they do get nipped out at Foxborough against the Patriots. So they really need to bounce back. And, I think they can do it at home here. I like the fact that they're getting a turnaround on a short week. I think that tends to favor the team that's at home, the team that's the better team. Favorites have done well in these primetime games on short rest. And so I think, I'm looking for the Bills to bounce back here. I think Josh Allen can have a better game. He hasn't been great. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know what the deal is, Mark. I heard something crazy over the summer from like someone tuned into football, and they said, Josh Allen, like he's not like fully focused on football. Like there's a lot of other things in life he focuses on. I didn't put much stock into that at the time, but we've seen some like distracted performances from him this year, to like say the least. But he has been okay bouncing back. You look at the Bills coming off of a loss. They came back from that loss to Jacksonville overseas and played, okay. They came back from the Monday night loss to the Jets, came out and won big the following week. So, I feel like this is probably a spot where the Bills bounce back. And I think more than anything here, Mark, I'm just willing to go against the Bucs. I had a 5% play on the Falcons last week. It was as much of a fade of Tampa Bay as it was a play on the Falcons. And the Falcons, I mean, they did everything imaginable to try to give that game away. And the Bucs still couldn't walk through the door and grab that win. I think it just kind of speaks to the, where this Bucs team is. Baker Mayfield's not a quarterback I trust a whole lot. He's someone that, like, if you go back to week 1 against the Vikings, that was before the Vikings were setting a ton of pressure, before Brian Flores had kind of like figured out how to get them to blitz and generate pressure on the quarterback. And Baker had a pretty good game throwing against a weak Viking secondary. So, you're going to hear all week long, Bills have guys out. Bills defense is banged up. The secondary is not that good. But the one thing the Bills do different that is really going to, hinder Mayfield here is they can rush the passer and get after the quarterback. And when Baker Mayfield has got to make quick decisions, when he's got to get rid of the ball quickly, he's not very good. And the Bucs don't have a great run game to lean on either. So I think the Bucs are going to have trouble moving the ball in this game. And if we can get a little bit of inspired play from Josh Allen and the Bills on offense, I think they're going to probably win this game, by the 7 to 10 point range. So I haven't added this to my card. I have seen it get bet up. I would have wanted closer to, the touchdown, maybe 7 or 7.5. But, you could throw it in a teaser. If it's 8.5, it's still in range to tease it down to 2.5 and try to get yourself that first leg home. And it's not a bad survivor play, which we'll talk about later in the show. But I do like the Bills here. I think this is the right spot for the Bills to bounce back, and I feel like they find a way to cover just about any number. I'll call it Bills by 10.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as far as a teaser option, but you're also getting into the part of the season now where travel on Thursday nights with injuries and everything else starts to play a role more for the road teams than it does for the home teams. So certainly worth a look there. The game, my big game breakdown here, I'm going to look at Dallas and the Rams here, where the Cowboys are a 6.5 point favorite. Trigger, you talked about what teams were in the beginning of the year and kind of Tampa Bay. Remember, they got off to that 2-0 start, and all of a sudden everybody thought that, hey, this team might be for real. Well, I've said for years, September is fool's gold in the NFL. Don't believe what you see. And that may be the case for the LA Rams. I mean, it's just possible that the Rams, who have been in a lot of close games, who have fought pretty well with a lot of teams, have not really proven that they're as good as they think they are. Let's kind of look at what's gone on here. If you look at the 3 games that they've won, they have outgained their opponent by margin, right? You're looking at a game against Seattle, 426 to 180, against the Colts, 467 to 329, and against the Cardinals, 382 to 345. So they're doing the things necessary to win the game. However, when you look at the games that they've lost, they've either only outgained them by a marginal amount or have been outgained. Against San Francisco, it was only outgained. They only outgained the 49ers by 20 yards. They were outgained by Cincinnati. They were outgained by Philadelphia. They only outgained the Cardinals by 40 yards, and they were outgained by the Steelers. So, this is a team right now that I think we're starting to see settle in, that despite what you saw in the passing game, just isn't really that good. And oh, by the way, too, look at their losses. San Francisco, a great defense, right? Eagles, a very good defense. Steelers, a fast, physical defense, despite what the numbers say. And the Bengals, too. Still, the defense for the Bengals this year hasn't been their problem. It's been their offense that hasn't been able to score. So they were shut down by a Bengals offense on the road. Now they got to go on the road after 3 straight games against a Dallas team coming off a bye here that, I just know is flat out better than the Rams are. And when I look at this game objectively, I'm not sure that the Rams are really in the same category as the Dallas Cowboys here. And, this is a spot here for Los Angeles where I don't like the matchup at all. I know Dallas's pass defense is taking some hits with injuries and everything else, but to me, again, Dallas after the losses they took before the bye, now they're coming back into this whole thing. I really kind of like the Cowboys here under a touchdown at 6.5. And again, you look at the Rams. I know they've played in a bunch of close games here, Trig, but when you look at the games that they've lost, they lost by 7 to Pittsburgh, double digits to Philly. They lose by 7 to the Niners, and they play overtime. I'm sorry, they lose by 3 to the Bengals, rather. So maybe, just maybe, the Rams, as competitive as they've been, just aren't good, and they're going up against a very good defense here. They kind of, I think, get outclassed here, and I haven't bet it yet, but it may make the card by the end of the week. I think really the Cowboys are going to win this one and win it rather easily.
Mark, I agree with a lot of what you just said, and it kind of segues us into the next conversation that we're going to talk about as far as Survivor's concerned. I think a lot of people are going to overlook the Cowboys as a potential Survivor pick this week, and I think that's a little bit incorrect. Listen, like, I get it. You're going to need a team for the Thanksgiving week if you're still in Survivor. You are going to have, a lot of people have used the Dolphins, which we'll talk about as an option this week if you still have them. But I think the thought in everyone's head is, I've got to save the Cowboys for Thanksgiving, when at this point you almost might be better off saving the Lions for Thanksgiving and let them get healthier. Maybe you go, because here's the thing, Mark, it's all about pick equity at this point. If you are still in Circa Survivor or any Survivor competition, but specifically, the big Circa one is what we talk about on the show, and you're down to the last 1,200, you have to start looking at like pick equity, what everyone else is going to use, and take that, into sort of like your roadmap for the rest of the way. I think a lot of people are quote unquote saving the Cowboys for Thanksgiving when I don't think there's that much of a difference. Like, I think the Lions are a better football team when healthy than the Cowboys. So I agree with you. I think the Cowboys win this game. And I actually think they might be the if you're going to use one of the Thanksgiving Day teams this week, it might be Cowboys more so than the Lions, which everyone will probably use, and they still have some injury concerns.
Yeah, and you mentioned, look, some of the bigger spreads out there. Obviously, you mentioned the Dolphins, Cowboys. If you haven't used the Niners yet at home, maybe they're worth a look. Or even if you haven't used the Eagles yet on the road, although I don't like that spot in the division game. But we always say this every week when we discuss Survivor, you got to zig when everybody else zags, right? And I'm going to give you 2 here, Trig, that I think are worth a serious look. And even though they're on the road, they're not division games, and they are favorites that I think you can get behind. One of them, and this would be my second of the 2, would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you believe, like many of us do, that the Steelers are not that good, that there's an argument that the Steelers should have a lot more losses than they do on their schedule. And I know they talked about their defense before, but their pass defense still has a lot of problems. The Jaguars seem to be coming into form a little bit. They've now won 3 straight, and this looks like a team that's going to be a big part of the AFC playoff picture going forward. How do they respond on the road? I mean, we'll have to find out. But again, this is a Jacksonville team right now that seems to be getting better every single week. And the one I really want to take a hard look at here with you, Trig, and no one would have thought this a couple of weeks ago, but why not give the Houston Texans a look as they're on the road against Carolina? Texans are coming off a bye. They clearly have the better quarterback. They clearly have the better offense. This is not a Carolina team offensively that's going to threaten anybody. And the Texans defense, while not great, certainly has proven under DeMeco Ryans as the head coach that they can be athletic, they can be fast, and they can create some problems. This is also a Texans team that beat the hell out of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Texans here against what many people think is the worst team in the league. I certainly think they are one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the league. And I know it's back against rookie quarterback. He's actually proven that he is much better under center than his counterpart, Bryce Young. I think the Houston Texans are worth an excellent look here for Survivor this week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I agree with the Texans. I think that, I refuse to bet on the Panthers or even consider the Panthers with Bryce Young at quarterback. I think Andy Dalton's a better quarterback on that roster. And so they'll probably be a fade for me until Dalton is somehow thrust into playing, and then I might look to bet on them. But as it pertains to Survivor, now I kind of lean toward the Steelers, but those 2, like this week, I don't think you need to go that deep into like taking a road like a small road favorite this week because there are a lot of like very good options. It's just it just starts to come down to, do you have them available? Like you already kind of pointed
Right.
out the 49ers. 49ers are probably a great option if you still have them because they're at home. Are they going to lose a
Lost in a
third
row.
straight game? Yeah, I mean, it feels like the Bengals. You go back to 2 weeks ago. I had a best bet on the Bengals -3 at home against the Seahawks. Felt very fortunate to win that game. I think you can even make the case that the Bengals, like while they ended up sort of pulling away from the Cardinals, there was a spot in that game where the Cardinals were starting to take over, and Dobbs threw a pick six, and it really like totally flipped the momentum of the game. I feel like the Bengals are probably due for a loss. So, but again, we're talking about Survivor. A lot of people still in Survivor pools don't have the 49ers, and they don't have the Bills, and they don't have the Dolphins. But if you have those teams, they're probably great options this week because all three of them come off of a loss. Bills come off of the loss to the Patriots. Dolphins come off the loss to the Eagles. So those are all really, in my opinion, great options, even more so because now you got some serious pick equity because a lot of people have used them. Other ones like Ravens and Chiefs, probably some good pick equity there. But now you have to start making a case for these teams on the road. Again, I guess those would be the teams I would look at first. And then if I had to start saying, okay, I've used some of these teams, now I've got to go the shorter favorite route. Well, we already talked about Cowboys. I still think the Cowboys are a really good option if you have them. Of course, you have to consider Chargers and Lions, but I think people are going to be lazy this week. I think a lot of people are going to really quick look and say, all right, let's take the Chargers or let's take the Lions because, they have inferior opponents at home. But the Chargers have been flawed and the Lions have been banged up. So I don't know if I want to be on either of those teams with everyone else. Shorter favorite, I guess go ahead, Mark. Yeah, jump in.
I was going to say, I mean, again, you talk about pick equity, and the natural inclination is think is when will you use the Texans again? Well, just for some, foresight here, after the Panthers this week, they host the Buccaneers at home, which may be another advantageous spot for them. And then 2 weeks after that, they host the Cardinals. So there is some room left to look at Houston. And, oh, by the way, they still host the Titans, who may be in full sell mode by the end of this week,
Sure.
later on in the year, in week 17 it is. On New Year's Eve, they host the Titans. So there is a chance for you to still use Houston down the road. You have to kind of look at some of those things if you're going to go out on a limb, and look at a team that people might not look at, just say, what do they have left on their schedule that may be another spot I can use them?
Yeah, listen, if you are still fortunate enough at this point to be in your Survivor competition, specifically the Circle one, like the big one, it's got to be roadmap time, like Mark said. You have to start mapping this thing out, and you have to start seeing your path to get to the end. I think the first few weeks, it's about survival mode. Take the layups because you don't know what team is going to be great. When we start this back in September, you don't know who's going to be great.
We have a much better sense of who's what at this point in time, 6-7 weeks into the season.
100%.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why a team like the Seahawks, if you still have the Seahawks, that you have the best pick equity of any team in any team still available because so many people have burned the Seahawks now that you're in that contest with the fewest people still have the Seahawks available. So it really does make sense to try to find a spot to use them if you can. And this would have to be on the list. The Browns have a fantastic defense, but the Browns were very fortunate to win that game last week. Very fortunate. Almost. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'll ask you one more here and your thoughts on it. Because while it is a road game, it's not a true road game. Would you want to take the Jets against the Giants at MetLife Stadium?
No, only because, listen, I don't hate the prospect of the Jets winning there, but the Giants I just feel like the Giants are going to be a lot better as they get healthy. I guess I'd have my eye on the.
They can't get worse.
Right. I mean, listen, the Giants, they didn't play bad last week against the Commanders. And you have to think that the Giants, they're not the team you really want to bet against right now, because they've played so banged up so much of the season. You have to think as they get healthy that they're going to be a little bit better than what the market thinks they're going to be. Now, coming off the win, I don't know. Like you could make an argument that, can they win back-to-back games? Well, that's an argument to be made. I listen. I don't hate like the thought of the Jets winning there. Like you look at the matchup, it looks like a good matchup for the Jets and a good spot. But again, I just think there's better. I think there's better options for Survivor this week for most people. Where if you're gonna get stuck on like a short, like 3-point favorite, it's got to be like the Seahawks who have a home game, or like one of the other short favorite. Like if the Packers end up going off a favorite, that's one you could consider, even though I don't really love them in that matchup. But just speaking objectively, I think you could consider them. So, that's like the thing this week is there's just a lot of good matchups, but now you have to start really putting the effort in and mapping your path out, because that ultimately ends up being the difference. You want to make sure that you have a path to get to the end, because it's real now. If you're still in Circus Survivor, there's not many people left, and you have to think that you can get from this point to the end. So that's why the roadmap starts to really, really matter, I would say, starting this week.
All right. Well, guys, make sure you check out Adam Trigger at Top Flight SI on Twitter. Get all of his picks there, wt.buzz/AT. I'm over at SportsMemo, sm.buzz/MZ. Make sure you guys check out the full edition of The Hustle Show every Thursday night right here on Wager Talk TV. And while you're at it, hit the like button there. Hit that subscribe button as well, so you can be alerted to all of our betting content each and every day. And again, full episode of The Hustle Show tomorrow night right here on Wager Talk TV. So for Adam Trigger, I'm Mark Zinno. Appreciate you guys watching, tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with another Hustle Short and a full show coming up on Thursday right here on Wager Talk TV. You guys have a great day. Go cash some tickets.